Our next speaker, unfortunately, is not here today. I had a conversation with him. It's Dixon. Dixon Jones from Majestic. Dixon Jones from Majestic. I had a conversation with him a couple of days ago, and we had to record it. But it's not gonna be any worse. He won't be able to answer questions straightforward, but you still can put your questions on our website, and we will pass them to Dixon. Actually, if you have a good, brilliant questions to Rand Fishkin, put it in. I'll try to get him answer. I can't promise, Rand is a big guy, but I'll try to do my best and ask and push him to answer your question. But make intelligent, interesting question. Don't just ask what is SEO. Okay, so don't go anywhere. No advertisement. Straight go to Majestic. Majestic is speaking.
Hello, Anton, and thank you very much, everybody. Yes, I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person. It sounds very grand. I'm actually at the Microsoft HQ in London today. It's not particularly Microsoft related, but I'm at a small private conference there that are using the Microsoft offices, so I can't be live with you. But hopefully next time I will, and I hope I get invited back. So today I was going to talk about categorizing the web, and many of you will know that Majestic is a large web crawler. We crawl the internet in a pretty big way. We don't crawl as much as Google or Bing does, but we probably crawl about the same amount as Yandex does, as Baidu does, and those kind of guys. We've learned a lot about links, and one of the major things that we found is that links in themselves, telling you all the links doesn't really help. You can go to Google and get all your links, at least the first 100,000. But it's really how a search engine can derive meaning from those links. And we think that there's a lot of information, not just with links, but a lot of information about how search engines categorize the web. And we think that that's useful information for you, and I hope that you'll find it's useful information as well. So today we're going to talk about how categorization and topics affect everyone and everything on the internet. So here we go. So as I say, Majestic is a specialist search engine. We describe ourselves now as a specialist search engine, really for digital marketers, for internet marketers, not just a link map, but we do actually have a search engine. So you can actually put keywords into Majestic. But what we're trying to do is not just show you the best websites for a particular keyword. We're trying to show how we came to that decision, how we came to that logic. And of course, a large part of how we came to that logic is based on the link graph. We also have plenty of other information, and we hope to develop that. So our search engine is only an alpha. Please don't put it into your production environments. The link information, however, is good and getting better. When I say that we're a big crawler, it helps, I think, to try and explain a little bit about how large Majestic is. Twitter in the West is pretty big, particularly in the US and the UK, and they've said on an average day there's something like 500 million tweets, unique tweets a day on average. That's about 500 million. So how does Majestic compare? That's a kind of a visualization of size. You can imagine that 500 million tweets in your head. How does that compare to Majestic's crawler? Well, Majestic's crawler crawls around about, well, actually well over 2 billion web pages a day. So something like 4 times as many pages. Actually, it's now something like 3 billion. And what's more than is that's only counting one page every 90 days. We do, in fact, crawl busy web pages every hour, and we crawl other pages, depending on how important they are, how much they update, that sort of thing. And you don't have to crawl a web page to see a link. So we see something like 7 billion new URLs a day. And that's, again, only counting a URL once every 90 days. The reason I say 90 days is because we have 2 indexes. One of all the web links that we've seen over a 90-day crawl cycle. That's old links and new links. But if we don't see it in 90 days, it drops out of our fresh index altogether because we think that it's either lost or so buried that it's not so vital to you. If you really want to find it, it will now be in our historic index, which is a much, much larger index, and we keep all the information, including the deleted links. But ultimately, our fresh index will stay fresh. So you'll find in some of the other link tools that they may get data into the data quicker, but they tend to leave it in there for a longer period of time, or may not have the chance to recrawl it. So there's a trade-off between fast information and insightful information. We've chosen to go for insightful information as best as we can, but we still are very, very large. So today I wanted to really talk about a certain aspect of search engines. And one of the things about crawling so much is that we have a different look as to how search engines might see the internet and how they might do things with the internet than most SEOs do. So my personal background was search engine optimization, and I started that in 1999. But I've moved into Majestic and developing Majestic now, and that's allowed me to see the world perhaps more from a search engine point of view. So as search engine optimizers, we know a fair amount about how the search engines work, and we have 4 or so different phases. Firstly, a search engine has to collect the data. That's all about the crawl. That's how they see websites and scrape the data off of websites and pull that together. Then they've got to group that information into places so that they can index the information as well. And so then we know a lot about the indexing because we spend a lot of time looking at whether whether our results are in the search engine results, how high they are up in the index results. So we spend a lot of time looking at the index and that algorithm. And then with the more modern search engines or the more modern patterns, there's data matching as well, which is kind of Google Suggest, Yandex Suggest, where they're kind of suggesting the words that you're about to search for to try and get in the head of the user. So the search engines spend a lot of time trying to understand the user, they're personalizing results, that kind of information. And we can spend a lot of time seeing the collection of the data, the indexing of the data, and the matching of the data as SEOs. But because it's buried so deep in the algorithm, we very rarely look at data grouping as a community, as a group of internet marketers. And that's the bit that I want to talk about today. Do the search engines group data? Do they put things into topics or categories? And if so, how do they go about it? And why do they go about it? And I think the why is really where I want to start. Why would search engines benefit from grouping data before they start indexing it? So I'm going to start with an analogy, so something that doesn't involve the internet. If you were given the task of finding the mass of the moon, and it was before search engines existed, then a very reasonable thing to do would be to go to a library. And you could go into the library and you could go and find the mass of the moon. But how would you go about doing that? You could go to the first book in the library, have a look, open it up, see that it's about fashion, realize it's not going to have the mass of the moon, move on to the next book, which is also about fashion because they're all grouped together, read 20 books on fashion, then move on to the next section, which happens to be about, say, geography, then the next section, and you go all through the system until you find the section on astronomy or some science or that sort of thing, and then you'd start to hone things down. But you wouldn't do it that way. What you would do is go into the library and ask the librarian where the astronomy section is, or ask the librarian, or go to the card section, the indexing system, to look for the section on astronomy and preferably a section on the moon, because that's where you're most likely to find the answer. And that's also where you're most likely to find several versions of the answer, and you'll be able to get the right opinion as to the mass of the moon. So what we do as human beings is very quickly, when we're searching for something, cut out the waste. We very quickly hone in to the section or the bit of information that is likely to contain the answer. And by doing that, we rapidly get rid of 99.999% of all the other facts and information out there so that we can concentrate on where we think we're going to find the right answer. So, of course, in order for that to happen, the library first had to put all of the books into groups. They had to set an indexing system, collect all the information together. And in their system, unfortunately, a book can only be on one place on the shelf. So it is about astronomy, or it is about the moon. So grouping makes searching better. Whether you're trying to find a fact or whether you're trying to find a friend or a customer or finding anything. So finding a friend, you guys are all in that room there, and you're having a conference and a conversation, or you're in a hotel with a group of friends. But if you go and talk to the barman, he has a lot less in common with you than the group of friends that you're with. So again, if you're trying to find a friend, you're more likely to ask your friends, do you know where John is, where Anton is, than you are to ask the person around the corner that you've never met before. So finding a fact, finding a friend, finding anything on the internet is quicker on the internet or in real life than using random chance. And there's actually some very good research on this. Categorizing into topics on the web, it prevents spam. And there's two real papers that stand out on this, and there's links there for those of you that really want to go and have a look at them. So the trust rank paper was actually, I think, Yahoo sponsored, or Yahoo were involved in developing the trust rank paper, which looks at trust around the internet and how grouping things reduces spam. And then Stanford is closely associated with Google, because Google spent a lot of their time using Stanford for their research, and the original PageRank algorithm is still to this day a copyright or a patent that is owned by Stanford University, not by Google. So categorizing the web is shown to be, or categorizing data is shown to be good at speeding up information, and it's also good at delivering better results. So speeding up information is quite an interesting thing. We'll come on to that in a little bit, but I want to move on to now looking at whether the search engines actually do follow through and categorize the internet. And it's quite clear that they do in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that they do it is categorizing by data type. So clearly, if you're in Russia and you type in the Russian equivalent to credit cards, you would expect to get a different set of results coming back to doing the same thing in the UK. Clearly, Russian credit cards tend to be associated with Russian banks, so tend to be associated with the Russian people, whereas credit cards in the UK tend to be associated with British banks and associated with British people. So it makes sense for a search engine to flag, for example, the target country or countries that the content may be useful for, and not deliver it to web pages to very highly in results when people are searching from outside those countries, for example. Again, image search is another categorization, and it's much easier for a search engine to separate out all the images rather than trying to just have them all as URLs and interpret them in the same way that they interpret, for example, text search, because the data type tends to be very different. So the algorithm associated with it tends to be very different. So if they want things to work fast, then really it makes sense to group all the images together and have a database and index just of all the images, so that you can then at some point take that image information and blend it with other types of data. Similarly with video, the second largest search engine in the world is YouTube, and another Google-owned property. What Google have done is they've encouraged all of the videos to go onto YouTube, obviously, but searching videos is not limited to just YouTube videos. They will also put any other video content that they find around the web into their video index as well. Another way that search engines categorizing things by data type is taking the country level to the next level and create local listings. So clearly, if you're looking for, I don't know, pizza in Kiev or pizza in Moscow, then you don't really want information about the New York pizza company. That's not going to really help you. So it's very important to local listings that the local information is there on a page, and so it makes sense for a local tag being associated with any record as well, and that has led to a complete local index in many countries around the world. Maps, again, a different type of data. Travel, a different kind of data when you're trying to find, flights to or hotels in. The search engines are putting things into different data types. So there is clear categorization, but that's not necessarily the way that that we think as SEOs. But it is important, because if you start looking at a web page, you can see this is Google, but I'm sure increasingly the other search engines are very, very similar in that there's a lot of grouping here. So firstly, the grouping is right at the top. This grouping is getting into the head of the user, and it's actually the last part of the first slide about trying to second guess what the user is looking for. But it's got this section of information which is just based on user habits, your user history. But then the data comes in, and Google knows that as you type pizza, in this particular one, this was actually done in the US, I think, and oh no, this is London. I searched for this in London, and it really thinks that Pizza Hut is the biggest player, and it knows so much that it's actually indexed the whole of the website, and it's showing us a little index just of pizzahut.co.uk because they think it's so relevant. Also, there comes a map, so it's worked out where I am, and it's showing me the 3 nearest Pizza Huts to where I am or where I was when I was creating this slide. And then a completely different index of information is the local listings coming out here, and on they come, and that's entirely taking the data actually from the map, but it's actually taking the local listing information and all the information associated with it, and then it's got a knowledge chart as well, and actually this is talking about the Pizza Hut found in Kansas in the United States, and it's got effectively, I would guess, a Wikipedia article content here. So none of these results actually are what we would consider traditional SEO results, but they are very much showing how Google and other search engines group data by index type. But of course, as SEOs, we don't think in terms of data type. We think more in terms of topics. In particular, we tend to think about keywords as SEOs, because that's where the user starts. They start by typing in a keyword. But there are other ways in which the search engines have grouped things traditionally that really do play to a search engine optimizer's hands. And one of these, of course, is directory listings. And although Yahoo directory died several years ago, well, actually not so long ago, actually, only a couple of years ago, it was the original internet, to be honest with you. There was a time, our Italian ambassador still talks of a time when he actually had a printout of every website on the internet. He's not a young man, but he has a printout, and basically it was a book that Yahoo published at Christmas, and it was a directory of the whole internet. There was a time that was the web was that small. But the methodology that Yahoo directory used was a human-edited directory that looked at all the different web pages on the internet and scored them. And there are other things that are still there to this day. Yell is a human curated directory system. Best of the Web. There's Joanne. There's other systems out there that still do manually review websites and put things out there. And what they're doing is something very similar to the library system of categorizing websites. The problem is that doing this doesn't scale very well. And eventually Yahoo found that, trying to manually look at every web page was too difficult. They had to start charging people, and it didn't have legs in the end. But the other problem is that scaling, that categorizing a website is no longer particularly relevant. because a lot of websites are about many, many different things, depending on the page and depending on the data type. So if you take, RT.com, of course, it's mostly about news, Russian-focused news to the international community, but it's got an art section, it's got a history section, there's other bits on there and other bits of content on there. There's also different data types. There's a lot of video content out there. So one video may be about a political situation in the Middle East, whereas the next might be about, the relationship between Russia and China, for example. So there's a lot of different problems there, in that one web page may be about something that's completely different to the whole website, or to the next website on the next web page on the same site. So it doesn't scale. So Google looked at a different approach, and we know that they looked at this approach, which is really, some people use the phrase latent semantic indexing. There are other ways of looking at it, but essentially they spent a lot of money, spending a lot of money and a lot of energy trying to analyze how different words relate to each other and how different words can be used to describe the same thing. So this is a bunch of words on the screen that mean the same thing, essentially, and it's important to see that Google has spent all this time, because you don't any longer have to even have a particular word on a page to rank for that page, because Google knows the content of a web page better than you do, because it's looked at the other ways in which a topic is described. So they've spent some time defining topics by keyword, and they've used this approach, and it's an approach that we did look at, and we found it extremely difficult to replicate for a couple of reasons. The first being that we don't store on-page information when we crawl the internet, but also we found that the permutations were very, very huge, and to try and get meaning there really required quite a lot of energy, and we found fairly low correlations. So hopefully Google have done a better job than us, but we had to find a different methodology to defining topics. And I think we found a way that Google may or may not use, but it's effective. So how do we categorize the web? Well, we found when we were looking at links that content tends to connect in groups. So if you are a person that likes to talk about 3D printing, for example, you're likely to link to content that shows interest in 3D printing. You're likely to talk about it, and you're likely to be talked about by people who are trying to talk about 3D printers. So content tends to connect in groups. And by the same token, then, keywords tend to gravitate into groups, not necessarily into one group. If you talk about horseshoes, horseshoes in the UK are seen as very lucky, or were. So a horseshoe could either be associated with the farming industry, or with horse riding, or with astrology and hocus pocus and fortune telling, for example. So they could be in any three of those groups. But nevertheless, they're unlikely to be in the politics group or the financial services group. So keywords gravitate into groups, and content connects in groups. And we thought, this is quite interesting. Maybe we can start to use this. So for those that don't know about how we score our pages on the web, this is a quick diagram, and it's very close in concept to Google's original PageRank algorithm, in that we understand that links are a one-way traffic. You can only go from page A to page B on a link. You can't go from page B to page A unless you press the back button on your computer, or there's another link on the page that reciprocates. So if on the left here, page A links to page B, links to page C, links to page D, then there's some kind of meaning, some kind of influence that page A gives to page B, and therefore that page A gives to page C, and page A ultimately gives to page D. And it may be a very, very tiny signal that is going through all of those different iterations, but nevertheless, the important pages on the internet are influencing the less important pages on the internet. So this is a kind of similar concept. We don't use the same maths that Google did to do this, but we do use the same scale. And what we find is that at scale, if you make this assumption that an important page is going to influence the next any page it links to more than a less important page is going to influence, then that's going to give us a good understanding of how influential the web pages are on the internet. And so from this diagram, we can see that on the left-hand side, these blue pages, if we know that they're influential, then the chances are that the page above the Try Majestic Twitter profile is probably more influential than this page with the question marks on it. Even though both pages have 3 links going into them, the one on the left is likely to be more influential because we know that the pages on the far left are influential. So this is how we looked at the web. We thought, okay, PageRank, for example, just treated every page on the internet initially with the same value. They said it is worth the number of web pages, the number of links that go into that page. And they propagated that information. So propagate means send the information from page A to page B to page C to page D, etc. If, however, you have a bunch of websites of hundreds of thousands or millions of sites that you know are real, then you can take that signal and move it across the web as well. So that was our original trust flow, and then the real inspiration, I think, came out when we said, hold on, if we know that all these pages on the left-hand side are influential, and it does work that we can then take this algorithm across the web. What if we take all those pages on the left-hand side that are influential or not influential, but are real, written by humans, have been peer-reviewed, and at the same time are about, say, society and politics? If society and politics tends to link to society and politics, then can we use that model and propagate the same information, but with the tag of category society and politics? And it turns out that we can. So now we can also say, if all those pages on the left-hand side of the web, which we've seen and we know are created by human beings, are about a particular category, then we can propagate that information, and we can say with quite a good degree of confidence that the page above the Try Majestic logo there is more influential than in the category of society and politics than the one with the question marks on there. And this for us was a revelation, and we've tested the data, we've looked at the data, and we found some interesting things. One of the interesting things that we found is that the data works best with what we call a universal data set. So some research was done using the original PageRank algorithm, and it was done by doing the maths just on the Wikipedia website, because the person doing the research was, I think, from Toulouse University, I think it was, in France, and they ran the PageRank algorithm just across the Wikipedia data. They didn't have the resource to run it across the whole web, but what they found was that the Swedish botanist Carl Linus, who may or may not be influential to you, but certainly wasn't particularly influential to me, was seen, according to the strict maths of PageRank, to be more influential than either Jesus or Hitler, which was quite interesting, because I think that was an unexpected bit of information. But it's because they didn't analyze the full web. So if you used either Majestic's trust flow information or Moz's page authority information on the same pages, the Carl Linus page, the Jesus page, and the Hitler page on Wikipedia, both Majestic and Moz will correctly, I hope, say that that's not the best order for those 3 people. But our data is not based just on the Wikipedia articles. So every signal in links is small, and each signal is individually prone to error or opinion. But the point is that at scale, the error decreases and the confidence increases. So once you've got some kind of categorization, the more you crawl, the more you look at the whole universal set, the better your data set is. And it's not just about the numbers of links by any stretch of the imagination. What we've done then is we try and score everything into an easy number between 0 and 100, because us as humans have trouble equating long, complex numbers. So we then normalize this information into numbers. So this is an example of the topics that we associate with Bing.com. So Bing.com being being Microsoft's search engine, and where I am actually in real life today. We think that they've got a score of 70 out of 100 in the category of software/internet, and slightly less in the category of internet/searching. Social sciences comes in very high, and they're very big with schools and goodness knows what. And operating systems, of course, is very, very high because they run Windows. And then things drop off because it's a logarithmic scale. But if you look on the right-hand side, the actual influence is not necessarily correlating with the number of backlinks. So there are something like 770,000 external backlinks that we can identify specifically. Those links are about internet and searching, but only 26,000 that are about software/internet. But nevertheless, we think software/internet is more about Microsoft as a company. And similarly, there's other columns there which we bring out that also show that the number of links, quantity of links, is not relevant in this categorization algorithm. So it turns out that tropical trust flow is quite powerful. That categorizing the internet is very, very powerful. And there's a lot of advantages of categorizing information first before you start making some decisions as SEOs. Topical trust flow turns out to be a little bit more useful than PageRank, and not least because you can get it. You can't get the PageRank information anymore, but it's also more granular. It's a score between 0 and 100 instead of 0 and 10. We update it most days, so that's helpful as well. We think that it provides a measurable context and gives you an idea of the influence of a web page or a website at scale. There's other reasons why we think that it's useful. I won't go into them there, but certainly there is some value in categorizing it, and it's very easy to get it out now. And I think it's very helpful for a lot of internet marketing uses. It's certainly already used in search, and search engine optimizers, at least in the UK and the US and across Europe, use topical information to help with their search engine optimization. I'll give you an example of why that's good in a second. But it's also good in social as well, because influencers tend to talk about certain topics as well. So finding influencers is hugely important for search engine optimizers. It's much more useful if you're a finance company to have the chancellor of the Bank of England to talk about your product than it is to have somebody who's completely unrelated to the finance industry. So influence is also contextual in the same way that content on a web page is. It can also be used for credit checking of websites and companies, comparing different media channels, link building, of course, and even evaluating companies. There's a lot of people that use this kind of information to buy and sell domains, for example. But I want to just show the use case for search engines. And what I did was take the data out of SEMrush, which is another well-known Russian company, of course, and I took the US results that they showed for the phrase credit cards, for the keyword credit cards. And then I compared all the topical trust flows and the overall trust flows of the websites that came back. And we see here that we've got the column to the right of all those vertical columns gives the overall trust flow of the websites that are coming back. And it shows that creditcards.com comes back with a trust flow of 37, whereas the creditcards.chase.com comes back with a much higher overall trust flow for the whole website of 47, which is much, much higher in a logarithmic scale. But what's interesting is that it becomes much better correlation when you associate this information at the individual page level. We find that the numbers get much, much higher across the board when you look at the trust associated with the relevant topic. So the relevant topic here being business/financial services. And again, it's true. Creditcards.com is coming above creditcards.chase.com in the business category, even though it's got a lower credit card. So this isn't a panacea. It doesn't get everything right. Clearly, exact match domain still has power on the search engines, and so other domain factors are coming in. But in terms of link signals, it becomes much, much more relevant to see that all the results coming back for credit cards are heavily biased towards the business slash financial services category. So here's a quick quiz for you guys. Even though I'm not here in real life, think about it amongst yourselves. Who do you think is more influential on Twitter? Is it Lady Gaga, the singer, or is it Barack Obama, the American president? So think amongst yourselves. Normally I get people putting up hands and things, but think amongst yourselves and have your guess. Make your decision now, folks. Who's more influential? Well, possibly it's better that a world leader is more influential than a musician overall. So we do have Barack Obama in our data set being slightly more influential than Lady Gaga. That's in spite of the fact that Lady Gaga has 40 million followers and Barack Obama has 36 million followers. However, when you start putting topics over here, it becomes very much an it depends. When is one influential and when is the other influential? And it really does depend. Barack Obama is only influential, of course, when it comes to government or politics, or to a lesser extent, financial services. Whereas Lady Gaga is influential in art / music, so particularly music, and then she drops off very, very rapidly and becomes much less influential very, very quickly. So influence is in context as well. So if you're looking to get people to talk about your blog post, then they better be influential in the topic that you're talking about. Otherwise, you're not marketing, you're just pushing out a noisy message. And it's like going onto the streets of Moscow and giving random people leaflets in the street. This isn't marketing, it's not targeted. And it would only make sense if you had a product that appeals to everybody in Moscow. And if you have a product that appeals to everybody in Moscow, you probably don't need to give them all leaflets. So we're nearly at the end here, and I want to take away a few things. The first thing is that the butterfly effect is very, very real. Page A links to page B, links to page C, links to page D. Page A can influence something way, way away. So it's even though you can't see the links directly from rt.com to Majestic's website, say, doesn't mean to say that they aren't influencing something many, many iterations away. The butterfly effect can be very, very real. And the second takeaway is that connections on the internet at scale start to form measurable patterns, really, really measurable patterns that we can use, and we can use to develop insights. We can use it to categorize and create topics for the internet and tell us what a web page is about and how influential a web page is about that topic. So this information now we can update fast and frequently and scale it as well. And that's really the message that we want to get out there. Categorizing the internet is vital for search engine optimizers. It's vital for search engines, and therefore it's vital for search engine optimizers to understand that categorization is taking place in many, many different forms. I hope that's useful for you. Thanks very much for your time, guys.